Hey, welcome. Today, we are cracking open the code behind, well, almost everything in human history trade. And look, this isn't just about old ships and dusty coins. We're talking about a powerful set of if then rules that literally built our world, and you know what? They're still running it today. So let's get into it.
It really all boils down to one simple question. Why do we go through all the hassle of moving stuff thousands of miles across the planet? Why can't we just make everything we need right here, wherever here is? Well, the short answer is we can't. It's just not possible because of things like geography and scarcity. And the solution, for thousands of years, has always been the same: exchange.
So here's how we're going to tackle this. We're going to build this machine of trade piece by piece. First up, we'll look at the initial spark, what gets it all going. Then, we'll talk about the economic price of all that progress. After that, we dive into the unstoppable exchange of things way more powerful than just goods. And finally, we'll see how trade completely rewires power itself.
Okay, so how does a massive global network just appear out of nowhere? Well, it doesn't. It's not random at all. Turns out there's a pretty clear, almost predictable logic to it. You need a very specific set of ingredients to get the whole magic of trade to actually happen.
The number one rule is just location, location, location. I mean, if your society happens to be on a coast, or at a river delta, or maybe bridging two totally different ecological zones, then you are basically sitting on a potential gold mine. I mean, just think about a place like Constantinople, straddling Europe and Asia. Geography isn't just a pretty backdrop here. It's the fundamental trigger for becoming a central hub in a massive network.
Right, but for a really durable, long-lasting trade route to form, you need something essential. Let's say Region A has a ton of tin but really needs copper. And what do you know? Region B has a ton of copper but desperately needs tin. In that case, trade isn't just a nice idea, it's practically inevitable. This is the whole logic of non-substitutable resources. You just can't make bronze without both of them. But, just having a reason to trade isn't quite enough. You still have to deal with the friction of distance. And this is where technology comes in and acts like a total game changer. Things like the compass, which came out of China, and the astrolabe, these allowed sailors to cross vast open oceans with some reliability. And then, centuries later, you get financial tools like letters of credit, which did the exact same thing for financial risk, making long-distance business possible for way more people. This reveals something absolutely crucial. Trade doesn't just run on ships and roads, it runs on trust. I mean, think about it. Before international courts, how on earth did you enforce a contract across an entire continent? Well, you relied on these incredible networks, like the Armenian or the Maghrebi trade diasporas. These were communities of merchants who were like the human software for trade. They were the on-site agents who shared a culture, a code of conduct, and made sure deals were actually honored. All right, so we've built our trade machine. It's connecting people, it's creating wealth. It sounds great, right? But like any powerful engine, it creates some pretty dangerous byproducts. The more societies become intertwined through trade, the more vulnerable they become, often in new and totally unexpected ways. So this lays out a chain of events, a pattern of dependency that we've seen again and again throughout history. You have a core society, one with advanced manufacturing, and it starts trading with a periphery society that supplies raw materials. Over time, that periphery gets so good, so specialized at producing those raw materials that its own local industries just die off. They can't compete. And the result? A state of total economic lock-in. And that kind of specialization puts you on a razor's edge. Focusing your entire economy on one single valuable thing, a cash crop, for example, can make your region incredibly rich. But that wealth is incredibly brittle. If global demand for your one product suddenly disappears, your entire economy can be shattered, literally overnight. It's a huge gamble. High risk, high reward. And now we get to the real ghost in the machine. Because those ships and caravans, they weren't just carrying silks and spices. No, the very connections that brought all this prosperity were also carrying invisible passengers, ideas, technologies, and pathogens. And these would change the world forever. You have to think of a trade route less like a road and more like a biological and cultural artery. Along the Silk Road, for example, Buddhism traveled from India all the way to China. At the same time, paper and gunpowder moved from China to the West. But maybe the most consequential exchange of all was often biological. New crops could totally transform agriculture, but new diseases, they could wipe out entire populations. This quote just captures that timeless dilemma perfectly. For centuries, leaders have had to face the exact same agonizing choice. Do you shut down the ports, shut down the roads to stop a disease from spreading, and in the process totally cripple your economy? Or do you keep the money flowing and risk a massive public health disaster? This tension is literally baked into the DNA of trade. And here is the really grim if-then logic of that dilemma. See, for most of human history, different populations were immunologically isolated from each other. So when new long-distance trade routes finally connected these separate disease pools, like linking Europe and Asia for the first time, the results were catastrophic. Pathogens were suddenly introduced to populations that had zero immunity, creating the absolute perfect storm for pandemics like the Black Death. Now, for our final section, we're going to see how the logic of trade doesn't just change economies, it fundamentally rewires entire societies. It changes who has the power, what a government actually cares about, and even the reasons why nations go to war. This is where you get real social disruption. It's what happens when money starts coming from the sea, not from the soil. In a traditional agricultural society, power belongs to the landed aristocracy. But when huge amounts of wealth start being generated through commerce, a powerful new merchant class emerges. And this conflict played out for centuries in places like Venice and Florence, where incredibly wealthy merchant families started to rival the old nobility for power. And you see this same conflict play out at the state level. A land-based kingdom cares about fertile fields and stable borders. That's its bread and butter. But a trade-based state, like the Hanseatic League, lives or dies by its ports and its sea lanes. Its whole incentive structure is completely different. It pours money into navies and lighthouses and keeping roads safe because that's what protects its revenue. So when the stakes get this high, you can bet the competition is gonna be fierce. And when that competition boils over, you get what we call a trade war. It's a conflict that's not fought with soldiers, but with economic weapons, like tariffs and restrictions, all designed to hurt a rival's economy while trying to protect your own. And that brings us to our final rule. If states start competing over the same valuable trade routes, then there is a very high probability that this economic competition will escalate into actual military conflict. History is just littered with examples, from nations sponsoring pirates to sabotage their rivals, to the Great Anglo-Dutch Wars, which were fought explicitly over who would control the global arteries of commerce. So that leaves us with one final thought. This ancient logic of trade, its incredible ability to generate wealth, but also to create dependency, to spread ideas and diseases, and to fuel conflict, that logic is still with us. From modern supply chain shocks to global pandemics, we are still grappling with the exact same risks. The connections are just faster now, and the stakes are so much higher. So the question is, have we actually learned anything from the past?